ask Dr. Moore to share his, and there it is.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Asha. Okay, so that's our first slide. Dr. Moore, you can switch over to the next one. Um, do you have an exit plan? As this slide demonstrates, life is a continuum. All the things depicted in the circle of life are things we typically plan for, and our death should be something we make plans for as well. I want to share what led to my deep conviction. Donnie, follow my script, please. I want to
It's all
share
right.
what led to my deep conviction that everyone deserves the right to choose their own end of life path. I am currently on the board of Hemlock Society of San Diego and a founding member of A Better Exit. Prostate cancer resurrected its ugly head again in 2005, before California had our End of Life Option Act. This time, the doctor told my father it was terminal and he had a year to live. I was informed of my father's plan to shoot himself when it became time. I was able to talk him out of that by working with him to explore less violent options. Fortunately, he was advised on how to OD on his medications. He slowly accumulated enough. On the day, he took my mom to dinner to say goodbye, and she checked into a nearby hotel so no one could accuse her of helping him. Alone, he sat at the dining room table with his pills and a bottle of Courvoisier. The next morning, my mother and I found him lying under the table where he had fallen. My mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2017. She did everything possible to slow its progression. In February 2021, she fell and broke her collarbone. She was placed in a skilled nursing facility for 2 weeks. She now had Alzheimer's on her permanent medical record. The retirement community where she lived independently for over 10 years would only allow her back if she entered their lockdown memory care unit. Once there, she asked a nurse about the little white pills she could take to end her life, referring to the pills my dad had taken. This was the beginning of a frantic search into what options were available to her. The only legal thing in the US that she could have done was voluntary stopping eating and drinking. She wanted no part of that. Thanks to the Hemlock Society of San Diego, I stumbled across voluntary assisted death in Switzerland, which was expensive but painless and quick. By this time, she was quickly losing her cognitive capacity, which is one of Switzerland's criteria. Her window of opportunity was rapidly closing. My sisters and I flew with her to Switzerland in July of 2021, where she died mid-laugh with her 3 daughters by her side. Both of my parents demonstrated remarkable strength and courage to secure the end-of-life choice that they wanted. You're muted, Donnie.
Thank you, Christy, for for that introduction of your interest in the field, and thanks, Dr. Devereaux, for having us here. Yes, so my name is Dr. Donald Moore, and I'm an end-of-life physician. And how I found my way to this work is it's sort of a long, circuitous process, and the long version. But the short one is that I was in working in Michigan doing primary care during my primary care residency, and it was a very small community-based program. Found myself in the hospital, um, and realized that there were people coming back in a considerable number of times who had never really discussed their wishes. I would ask, what do you want outside of here? Or they would say, I don't want to go to this skilled nursing facility. And I would say, well, what do you want? And I realized that there wasn't a lot of conversations being had around wishes, options, and ultimately, sort of giving people the autonomy to make their own decisions and be informed of their decisions. So once I found out that hospice and palliative care was a specialty I could do, it really only made sense that that was my next trajectory, next step in my path. I found the hospice and palliative care program at UCSD. It was a UCSD and Scripps joint program, and sort of took a leap in coming out here to explore the program. I got extensive training on sort of end of life counseling and documentation and medication and sort of anything you could need to support somebody through the really last legs of their journey. And yeah, it really enriched my education in a way that I was missing, honestly, through the rest of the medical training. We're really good at fixing people throughout our medical training and learning how to do that in every way. Not so much about what happens, when inevitably things don't go well and we need to sort of pivot our mindset and have a good plan in place. Um, Towards the end of that training, I found medical aid in dying. Funny enough, even in a training about end of life care, that wasn't a big focal point. But I kind of became aware of it, and the more I learned, the more I realized that it was really good medicine, and that I could ultimately really help people get the thing that they most want and need, which is ultimately comfort and having control. And yeah, so now I've been kind of in my own practice for a couple years, year and a half. And yeah, through that, I'm, kind of mostly supporting people as an end of life physician. So one thing that people ask is, well, what is an end of life physician? Comes up all the time. Even my parents were like, what does that mean? What's an end of life physician? There's sort of a lot of perspective on what I do. Some people see me as a tiny little Grim Reaper before they, actually meet me. As you'll hopefully find out by the end of this, I'm not quite so scary. Although that one's kind of cute. But they wonder, what is your role? Are you just going to show up at my ending? And fortunately, not the case. So, what I primarily do in my practice, the biggest piece of it at this point is supporting patients through the medical aid and dying process. That's the way in which I was acquainted with Dr. Devereaux, and um, it's a lot of what I do. Patients who, have a terminal disease, as I will go into later in depth, have elected to go through this process and through maybe their hospice or their primary care doctor or just somebody they know in the community, they become aware of me and then they reach out and I support them and their families through the entire medical aid and dying process where they have visits, get the medication, and then ultimately I'm with them when they take the medication and pass away. So it's a way to hasten your death. In addition to medical aid and dying, I also help people through voluntarily stopping and eating and drinking for somebody who may not qualify for MAID, which is just shortened version of medical aid and dying. Um, it's not frequent that I do, but for some patients, stopping eating and drinking is the option they like to do, and it can be a peaceful death as well with proper support. So for like mostly the medical piece, I'm doing a lot of aid and dying, he said. Another piece of what I do is medical decision making and navigating the healthcare system. So, for people who maybe are earlier on in their disease, have maybe gotten a bad diagnosis, have recently lost a spouse or someone in their life, help sort of people create a roadmap and say, all right, what do we, with where things are at now, here are all the options, here are all the sort of contingencies, here are the things you should plan for. Let's make a good plan for you, and then you can just set that aside. I do some direct care, primary and palliative care as well. I have some ongoing patients. And then similar to what I'm doing now, do a lot of education around end of life options and making sure the public is as well versed as possible in what they need to be. So just some key takeaways, which got obscured by my picture. Some takeaway points. This is an important topic. You're all here because it's an important topic, and I'm proud of you all for coming because, on a Saturday morning, there's much more fun things I'm sure you could be doing. But it's important to learn about these things and be well versed. So it's important to talk about. Exploring your values is a really important part of this. When I start my conversation with people about what's going to happen later, the ultimately where we start is exploring what their values are, what things are important, what things give their life quality and meaning. Through that, we can then sort of shape how things might go if you're unable to access these things that do give you quality and meaning. Um, that how people live their life ultimately shapes how they die. And so, exploring those values is essential to this process for you looking forward. I would say discuss things early and often. Really bring up your wishes, bring up the things that are important to you, to your loved ones, to your medical team early on, and really talk about this stuff. The more you do that, the more your team will have a good grasp on the things you want and the things that are important to you, which is really, really essential for them. Create a roadmap, sort of a basic plan. It doesn't have to be detailed, but something that kind of goes over what you want with your family and your medical team. Again, a lot of these things are for you, but it's also for the comfort of those you love, so that they know what you want in the event that something happens. It's essential that you let them know what you want, so then they're not left guessing later. Knowing your options, that's exactly what you're doing today. Coming here, learning your options, getting educated, doing great. And then planning for what happens after you go is important as well. Some people say, well, I'll be gone. What does it matter what happens to me? I genuinely had a gentleman last week say, roll me into a river, I won't care. And so I said, well, I can't do that for a lot of reasons. But planning for you after you go is essential, and it's for, again, not for you. It is, but it's also for your loved ones. And so I know Christy will go over that as well. So just sort of some key takeaways. And now I'm going to hand things back over.
So advance directive. During an emergency or at the end of life, your family may face questions about what kind of medical treatment you want and not be able to answer them. You may assume that your loved one knows what you want, but that's not always true. In one study, people guessed nearly 1 out of 3 end-of-life decisions for their loved one incorrectly. You are more likely to get the care you want if you have conversations about the kinds of treatment that you would like and you put a plan in place. This may also help your loved ones feel less guilt and burden and let them grieve more easily. Final Exodus has a website dedicated to helping people think about and write their advance directive. Bill Simmons, the attorney who came up with the advance directive and website, is a retired San Diego attorney who has been involved in end-of-life issues for over 15 years. An advance directive is a general term for any document that contains instructions pertaining to a person's wishes related to medical treatment if they cannot make care decisions on their own. Common advance directives include the living will, which is what you want, medical durable power of attorney, which is who will speak for you. This person is sometimes referred to as a healthcare proxy. Unfortunately, less than half of Americans have a written exit plan. Although this number is up considerably from pre-COVID, when only 1 in 3 older adults had an advance directive. To plan for a good death, you need to take your time, think about what you want, and do your research. This is the thinking part. The most important and the most difficult is the talking part. The last and easiest step is writing your advance directive. The basic choices that you should consider, discuss, and decide are do nothing. Doctors know best. You are passive and follow their suggestions. You do nothing, and whatever happens, happens. Seek all medical options. You may want to live as long as possible, even if just for a few more days, regardless of your quality of life. This should be easily respected, as the focus of our medical system is to keep one alive as long as possible. Choose a natural death. Natural death generally means that under dire circumstances, don't prolong your life with resuscitation or ventilation. By law, you can refuse interventions or force them to be terminated or removed if they've already been started. Choose to hasten death. It might be easier for you to think in terms of the quality of life you don't want. The living circumstances you don't want are easier to specify than those that you do. Think about situations in which you would probably wish to die, such as unrelenting pain, needing 24/7 care, you develop stage 4 cancer, you don't recognize your family, or you have an incurable disease. So, for example, if you are bedridden and get pneumonia, you can refuse to be treated for it. You can request that you simply want to be kept comfortable. Talking with your family and choosing an agent is the most important thing you can do. You cannot do this alone. Not including your family and loved ones in your planning will leave them with regrets and questions after you die. And not including them will make it less likely that your plan, whatever it is, will be successful. It's important to sit down with your family and have a conversation about what you want and who your proxies are. Not all family members may agree with your choices, but if they hear it from you, it will be much easier for them to accept. Also, talk to your doctor. Make sure that they support your decisions. Medicare Part B covers voluntary advanced care planning as part of your yearly wellness visit. The following illustrate why discussing your wishes is so important. Should you become incapacitated and lie in an emergency room or any hospital room, the attending physician, not likely your primary or personal care physician, will turn to those family members standing near and say something like, "Your loved one is in dire circumstances. Here are the options, A, B, or C. Which one of these do you think your loved one would choose?" Often the physician will need an answer quickly. The family needs to know how to respond to such questions. Or even if you are in a hospital that has your directive, often the doctor can't or won't take the time to look it up. Conversations are also a way for you to clarify your thinking. Others may make points that hadn't occurred to you. You might change your mind about something. You may find that a family member doesn't agree with your wishes and might argue against them. If possible, you can try to get him or her to acquiesce to your wishes. If you are unable to achieve this, then you should let others know that this person is not to be involved in healthcare decisions for you, and you should document it in your advanced healthcare directive. The attending doctor reads in your advanced directive that under certain circumstances, you refuse all treatment and wish to die, even to accelerate your death. But if, for religious or other reasons, the doctor disagrees with your directive and chooses to ignore it, which does happen, especially in Catholic hospitals, your family needs to know that your wishes are to be followed, even if it means moving you to a different facility. Of all these reasons, the first is by far the most important. In emergency situations, the doctor is going to turn to whoever is nearby and ask, "Here are the options. Which do you choose?" That person, likely a family member, had better know what you would want. In selecting a representative, ask yourself, are they assertive? You want someone who is comfortable speaking with the healthcare providers and advocating for you. Are they comfortable talking about death, given that they will need to engage with the subject? Do they live nearby? In a crisis, having someone local can be important. Will they respect my decisions? They need to understand where you're coming from and be willing to honor your requests. Some options to consider: a family member or a friend. A family member may have a hard time pulling the plug or may be too emotional to understand what the doctor's saying. You can consider asking a neighbor or a member of your faith community. Your local senior services/elder care agency may have a program that provides volunteers for this service. Some communities have geriatric case managers who may serve as a healthcare representative for a small fee. Attorneys who specialize in elder law may also be willing to take on this role. You can go to your attorney to have them write up your advance directive, or you can write your own. It's easy to find examples of advance directives online. While you have the freedom to write what you want in your advance directive, you are very limited in how you formalize it and make it legal. In California, you have a choice of getting it notarized or having it signed by two witnesses who are not your agent nor your healthcare provider. Your advance directive needs to be readily accessible. You should make and distribute copies to the following people: your proxy or agent. Be sure to discuss it in detail with him or her. They need to have a copy, not just know where you put yours. I found it very convenient and necessary to have a copy of my mom's in the cloud, so it was always at my fingertips. I also kept a list of her medications there as well, which was very helpful. Your partner, if they're not your proxy, Again, discuss it. Even if they aren't your agent, they should have a copy. Your primary care physician. The Advanced Healthcare Directive will also let the doctor discuss your medical situation with your agent and not violate HIPAA. Other family members. Be sure to tell them who your proxy is. And other doctors who are treating you for any illnesses. From time to time, you need to review your advance directive. A reminder that is often used is the 5Ds, that the advanced care documents should be reviewed at a minimum when you start a new decade, when someone close to you dies, when you go through a major family change, for example, a divorce, if you receive a new diagnosis, or if you experience a significant decline. A POLST, physician orders for life-sustaining treatment, differs from an advanced directive and is generally used by people of any age who are seriously ill or frail, and it is used in emergency situations. A POLST is a special kind of medical document that turns basic decisions about your care and treatment preferences into medical orders that travel with you. You and your doctor fill out the POLST form with your medical care preferences. Next slide. There we whoops. We're not there yet, but that's okay. Keep it there. You and your doctor fill out the POLST form with your medical care preferences. The POLST travels with the patient across healthcare facilities and is honored by every healthcare provider. A POLST is a medical order, not a legal document like the advanced directive. This is important because in an emergency personnel are required to follow medical orders. Here's the POLST. Section A will ask if you want CPR attempted or not. Section B, the goals of care and medical treatments. Full treatment prolongs life by all medically effective means. And selective treatments treats medical conditions while avoiding burdensome measures. Comfort-focused treatments maximizes the patient's comfort. Do you want artificially administered nutrition? Example, a feeding tube. Since the POLST is a medical order, you can only change it through your physician. You cannot change it yourself. You will want to have a copy posted prominently on your refrigerator in case medical personnel are called so that they can easily see that you have a POLST. Your copy of the POLST is typically pink to help make it stand out. Do not resuscitate. This is an official medical document that instructs emergency personnel that you do not want any resuscitative measures taken if you have a heart attack. Your physician must also sign the form, and it should be displayed prominently near you, for example, your refrigerator. It can be included in the POLST. DNR bracelets and medallions. In California, one must have a DNR and POLST on file with one of the 3 official organizations issuing the bracelet or medallion. Your first and last name need to be on the first line. Your illness and/or allergies and phone number should also be engraved on the back. You cannot simply tattoo DNR on your chest and expect paramedics to honor your wish. The most common options for body disposition are burial, cremation, body donation. You can donate your body to medical schools or parts of your body to those who need them. More progressive options include aquamation, otherwise known as water cremation, where your body is dissolved into a liquid using 95% water and 5% alkali. This is more environmentally friendly and gentler on the body than cremation. Green burial. No chemicals are used and your body does not get embalmed. There are only 2 options in San Diego County: Joshua Tree Memorial Park and Fallbrook Masonic Cemetery. It is illegal to bury a human body in your backyard. Human composting. This will go into effect January 2027 in California. The body is put in a steel container along with wood chips, straw, and alfalfa. Oxygen and heat are applied to the container to speed the process of decomposition, which typically takes 4 to 6 weeks. Approximately 1 cubic yard of soil is produced.
Okay. Thank you, Christy. So now, having talked about sort of options once you've passed and some documents you might want. I'm going to go into some of the medical systems in place to support you as you go through, sort of the planning your exit. So, the first of which is palliative care. So, palliative care is probably one of the more important things that almost nobody knows about or knows to ask about. Essentially, say you were to go to the hospital, it's belly pain, and they say, you have a cancer that's causing it, and this pain is just unrelenting and not getting worse, and you don't know what to do. What they might do is call in palliative care at that point. And palliative care is a full team of, sort of interdisciplinary people. So there's doctors and nurses and social workers and chaplains, sometimes doulas. And it's this group of people that will come in and will strive to improve your quality of life. Um, and what that generally or usually comes down to is supporting your treatment of your symptoms. So some people have pain, shortness of breath, anxiety, and you're getting medication support and psychosocial support through the members of the team to most best alleviate these symptoms to make them less burdensome as you deal with them. In addition to that, there's sort of emotional and spiritual support around just what you're going through as a human, sort of outside of this physical pain, treating that existential pain, whether you need more religious support, or whether you need more, support around how to talk to your family about this, sort of engaging you in um, these aspects of your care that are, really intangible, but are also very important in making the best decisions for yourself and your family. Advanced care planning, which is, essentially going through a lot of these documents that Christy was talking about and making sure that all the right ones are in place and that, sort of the legal necessities and financial necessities with your, any estates you have or any assets you have are in place. They're essentially going to also make sure all of those are buttoned up in the best way they can, um, coordinating care of, other doctors. So, you might have an oncologist, you might have a cardiologist, you might have a pulmonologist, you have all the ologists in the world. And how are they all sort of communicating with you and each other can sometimes be a bit of a jumbled mess, to be honest, once you have a lot of things going on. And so, sort of coordinating everything, making sure everybody's on the same page and that everybody's doing things in line with what you want is another important part of the team. And then just providing support for caregivers, loved ones, other people who are in this with you. I say like, my patient is my patient, but the family is no less the patient as well. It's sort of everybody operates as more of a unit than we really, I think, realize until crises. So there needs to be adequate support for your caregivers and your loved ones as well. This is generally done in hospitals, nursing homes. The vast majority of it is done in facilities. But nowadays, as the field grows and the need is seen, there are some outpatient clinics. I know like UCSD and Scripps have outpatient clinics where they can even do telehealth visits with you if you can't leave your home, or you can come into the clinics, which are wonderful. And then there are some providers that sort of do palliative care outside of the home, like myself, who aren't affiliated with UCSD, but still, are still able to provide these services, and come to you essentially. Uh, Another important distinction is that this can start really at any time that you have a serious diagnosis. So generally, people, somebody going just their checkup is not going to really need palliative care all that often. But somebody with, kidney disease, heart disease, lung disease, some serious chronic illness, or an acute illness, maybe a lot of issues that came from a car accident, then you don't have to be necessarily at the last stages of your disease or acute crises in order to get palliative care. Palliative care is accessible just because you're sort of, as Christy said, in a dire situation. So it's important to know though that it doesn't have to be when you're terminal. It can really start at any point in the diagnosis. And why that's important is because palliative care has sort of a sister service, I would say. and it's hospice. And so some people conflate the two and think that they're kind of the same, and in some ways they are, but in some ways they're different. So both of these are helping out with treating, your symptoms, supporting you while you're going through, the arc of this disease or diseases. The difference between palliative care and hospice is a Medicare benefit that's going to support you once you have 6 months or less to live. So, we don't know for sure. We don't have crystal balls about your prognosis, the exact amount of time you have. But, we do have certain tools to figure out that, given your current disease and its current sort of trajectory, where it's headed, we think that without intervention, this disease would end your life in 6 months, within 6 months. We wouldn't be surprised if that were the case. And so at that point, that's really where hospice steps in. It's generally a pivot. You're doing life sustaining, life prolonging treatments, throughout your whole life in these medical treatments. You're getting surgeries, you're getting medications. We're aiming it to prolong your life. Once the diseases have progressed, and now we're saying, even with treatment, we don't think it's going to be successful. Or you say, I don't want treatment anymore. As Christy said, you have the right to refuse anything. So you say, I don't want treatment, I don't want anything. At that point, we sort of pivot from palliative care to, instead of prolonging your life, let's improve the quality of your life with the last 6 months, with the time you have left. And so that's where hospice comes in. But it's a similar, a multidisciplinary team. Again, doctors, nurses, social workers, chaplains, nursing assistants. There's sort of this whole psychologist, psychiatrist. I hope there's none on the call I left off for that. There's a whole crew of people who are there to support you in maximizing quality of life. Quality of life. So similar things though, symptom management, treating your pain, treating your shortness of breath, treating your anxiety, helping support your family. Another important part is medical equipment. So if you need a hospital bed, if you need oxygen tanks, anything you might need to make you comfortable in your home, they can provide. And that's important because this is usually done at home or your assisted living or independent living facility. So hospice generally isn't somewhere you go to. It kind of was earlier on in the field more so, and some areas of the country, there still are more of these hospice houses, as we call them. But generally, hospice is done in your home. So they're coming to you, and you're just sort of, in your own space that you're comfortable. And I think that it's important to keep in mind so that if you're hearing that word at some point, you're aware that it will probably be done in your home or your living space. And that, in addition to what hospice is, I think it's important to remember what hospice isn't. And hospice isn't full care. It's not what you have, say, in the hospital, where you constantly have nurses coming around and checking on you and PT working with you and people helping you along. Instead, it's more a layer of support, but you may have a nurse practitioner doctor visit once. You may meet the nurses weekly, once a week, maybe twice a week. Maybe the social workers every other week or so. Chaplains again weekly. Maybe nurse's assistant weekly. So you're having the support, but they're not really caring for you full time. You still have your family, loved ones, friends, or outside, agency nursing support who are doing most of your care, and you're doing the self-care too. I think that is important so that the expectation isn't, well, I leave the hospital and go home for hospice and I have the same team, kind of supporting me. They're supporting you, but less all-encompassing. And so on sort of essentially once you're hospice eligible, it really lines up nicely with the next talk, with medical aid in dying, which I know a lot of people are curious about. I have a bit of an overview, and then ultimately, though, a lot of people have questions, natural. So I'm going to go over this, and then once I go over it at the end, if you have any questions, jot them down, or any burning ones, feel free to raise your hand. and cut me off. And then we'll have all your questions answered at the end. But so medical aid in dying, what is it? What is this thing? The thing we call MAID. Um, so medical aid in dying is a process by which someone who is, the definition, a terminally ill adult with decision-making capacity can voluntarily take a prescribed medication with the knowledge that it will end their life. So what do all those things mean? So a terminally ill adult. So you have to be terminal to do this. You have to have a disease, again, that within 6 months or less, the medical system thinks would end your life just sort of in its natural progression. We don't know how that will happen, but pretty sure within 6 months is the time limit. You have to be an adult. So you have to be 18 years of age or older. Kids can't participate in this. Voluntarily taking this medication. So, and in addition to being a resident of the state, you have to be a resident of California. Should be fine for most people on this call. Just a quick caveat, because there are 10 states and then DC that have this law. So it's not every state, it's state by state. And most states, you have to be a resident of the state. Vermont and Oregon, you don't. So if you're on this call and you live in not one of the 10 states where it's legal, you can still get this access to this through Vermont and Oregon. It's, logistically pretty challenging, to be honest, but not as challenging as, maybe going to Switzerland or having to move to another state. But you have to be a resident of California in California. So good to know. The voluntary part. So voluntarily means that you're taking the medication, you're asking for this service. Nobody's forcing you to do it. Nobody's sort of steering you to do it. It's really your choice. And a way that we assess that is saying, do you have decision-making capacity? Do you have the ability to make your own medical decisions? Do you understand what's going on with that you are sick and what's going on with your illness? Do you know that you have other options and what those options, maybe are? And then you have a good idea of sort of what it means to go through medical aid and dying, the gravity of it and the permanence of it. And so you have to sort of have a good grasp of those things. It needs to be able to kind of communicate that to your healthcare provider because it has to be voluntary. You asking for it, you doing it. And then the last thing is you have to be able to self-administer the medication. So you essentially, the powers that be have determined that this medication has to be taken through the GI tract. So you have to take it orally in the state, or if you're unable to swallow, you can take it rectally, or you can go through a G tube, what we call a tube directly into your stomach or intestinal tract, or some sort of maybe an ostomy if you have a bag. It just has to go into the GI tract. We can't do IV, and or any other pathway. It has to be orally ingested. So you have to be able to do that, in some way, give yourself the medication. And again, knowledge that this is a process that will end your life is an important part of it. So the sort of like cut and dry requirements, so it requires the participation of at least two physicians, I'll say. And I'll say that because, there's two doctors who are certifying you with this component of it. But as I mentioned, given that 6-month prognosis, people asking for medical aid and dying are oftentimes also on with hospice. And so you have a hospice doctor who sort of has certified that you're terminal. You have maybe your doctor who referred you to the hospice. And then, you have two other physicians. So the attending physician, which is often me, this is usually where I step in. Somebody calls and they say, I have terminal cancer that is sort of spread all over my body and starting to feel myself decline, and I don't necessarily want to go to the nth degree of this disease. Or I just really want to be prepared for when things do get worse. I don't want to wait until the sort of last minute and then be scrambling. So as the attending physician, I, then start this process with them. I walk them through. I have two visits, at least two visits with them. They have to be at least 2 days apart. And it's really about learning about them as a person. It's about making sure that they understand everything and make this process as easy as possible for them. And then determining, making sure that they're eligible to do this. You know, there's a good amount of people who want to do this, but sadly don't qualify. And we explore other options, but a big part of my job is making sure you can do this. And I think you can do it safely. And then I also submit the prescription. And then, I am almost always with my patients when they take it. Not always. There's some reasons why I can't be, but most of the time I am. That's not a requirement of the physician who might be doing it, so you're aware. So I didn't put it as a requirement. But it is nice to find a physician, if you can, who can be there with you. I find support around taking the medication is very, very important. And then there's a second doctor who's has one visit and is essentially independently determining that you're eligible to do this and is reviewing your records and sort of, again, making sure it's another stop to make sure that you can do this process. And then there's a written request. It's a written document where you write your name and your diagnosis, and it just goes through all these things about other options and what taking the medication means. And it sort of is all of these are checkpoints to make sure that that we're confident the person is making this decision and isn't being coerced. We really don't want that. The written request has to be witnessed by two people. So we really want to make sure that the person making this decision is the one making this decision. It's very important to the law right now. And then again, you receive this medication. So once somebody's done all these visits with me and met with a second doctor, and I have all this paperwork that goes to the state pharmacy and all this, once you have the medication, at that point, it's totally on your timeline. And whenever people are ready, I tell them to reach out to me. We schedule a day, and that's ultimately when you take the medication. I had an extra slide that I don't know how it got removed. So, when you're ready to take it, generally, again, it's generally drank orally. And so I will come and be with people. Once you mix the medication, it's a small volume. It's really only about 2 ounces or so of liquid. And, these medications are then drank. And it just takes a few minutes for you to fall asleep to a very, very deep sleep. And then once you're asleep, generally, I tell people within 30 minutes to a few hours is pretty standard amount of time where you'll be in a deep sleep, and the medication works to slow your breathing, slow your heart, and ultimately, end your death peacefully in your sleep. You can have whoever you want there. Some people want it to be just intimate, just maybe me and, say their wife. Some people, they'll throw large, kind of lavish gatherings where they have friends, families there. People might be playing music and telling stories or poetry. You can kind of shape the day however you like. But yeah, ultimately, we've sort of planned for that day. So most people are ready and have a sense of knowing when it's time to take it. All right. And yeah, again, any questions I'll be happy to answer at the end, but I'm going to pass things back to Christy.
While we are grateful to live in California, where we have access to aid in dying, unfortunately, only a small handful of individuals take advantage of it. In 2023, 1,281 terminally ill Californians received prescriptions for medical aid in dying, and 69%, or 884 of them, took the medication, and of these, 64% had cancer. This amounts to only 0.30% of all deaths. To help put this number in perspective, Canada has roughly the same population as California, and their law went into effect in 2016, the same year as Californians. In 2023, there were 19,660 requests, with 78%, or 15,343 people, taking advantage of aid in dying. Once again, 64% had cancer, followed by those with neurological conditions. 4.7% of all deaths were due to aid in dying. Some of the disparity is because Canada has a much more liberal law, allowing anyone with a grievous and irremediable disease who still has capacity to access aid in dying. But that is not the only reason. According to a 2024 study published in Mortality's March 14 edition, 75% of both Californians and Canadians believe aid in dying is morally acceptable. 45% of both Californians and Canadians said they would be willing to consider aid in dying if they had a disease like cancer. Only 25% of Californians are aware that aid in dying is legal in our state. This contrasts with 67% of Canadians who are aware of their legal right to aid in dying. Why this gap? There is a major difference in the way Californian and Canadian healthcare institutions inform the public about aid in dying. In Canada, most healthcare institutions have a list of all their medical services on their website. Medical aid in dying is as prominently displayed as any other service. In California, none of our large healthcare institutions include medical aid in dying in their readily available list of services, and they have the right to forbid their physicians from even mentioning the option of aid in dying. There is also evidence that physicians can be reluctant to mention aid in dying when discussing options with the terminally ill for fear of upsetting the patient. There is a new nonprofit organization called A Better Exit. I think one more slide, Donnie. There is a new nonprofit organization in California called A Better Exit, dedicated to expanding our state's law to include those with neurodegenerative diseases. As one of the founding directors of this grassroots effort, I am committed to ensuring more Californians have a right to a peaceful and autonomous end-of-life choice. Alzheimer's affects an estimated 720,000 people in California, a number projected to rise by 840,000 by the year 2030. Despite this growing crisis, our laws fail to provide a compassionate option for those facing the terrifying loss of cognitive function. People in the early to mid stages of Alzheimer's retain the mental ability to make informed decisions, but live in fear of a future where that ability is lost. They are aware of what lies ahead, a slow decline into confusion and dependency. Allowing these individuals access to aid in dying would enable them to make a proactive, dignified choice about their end-of-life care, preserving their autonomy. It would also allow them the opportunity to embrace and make the most of the time they have left. Your quality of life has become unbearable, and no hope of regaining any meaning or fulfillment is in the future. Yet you do not qualify for aid in dying in California or any other state, as the laws are nearly identical. What options remain?
So I'm going to talk, kind of briefly about VSED, or voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. So VSED, similar, to medical aid in dying, is a way that you can hasten your death. So it's an intentional decision, as is evidenced by the name, to stop eating and stop drinking due to some illness. Generally something about VSED is you can do it, really on your own. And there's some people who have. And you can really do it at any point. It's essentially a constitutionally protected right because it's refusing any treatment. You can refuse surgery, you can refuse medications, chemotherapy. You can also refuse food and drink, if given that you have decision-making capacity. So, this is a right of yours, to stop eating and drinking and pass away naturally from that. Now, kind of the complications of it are that it's not as quick and immediate as some of the, other things we're going to talk about. And so you generally do need support around this. Most people, the vast majority of people, you'll need sort of a team of maybe a physician overseeing what medications you need to make you comfortable. Because as you go through this, you might be uncomfortable for several days. And you might need nursing care. If you're ill enough, you may be eligible for hospice, and then hospice can support you in sort of managing these symptoms. But generally, you do need a team around you to support you. The reason being, it can typically take about 7 to sometimes 14 days. I'd say 14 is definitely on the longer side for sure. And it can be slightly shorter than 7 if you already sort of are a bit what we call medically frail, maybe not doing so well. But in essence, after the first day or so, people don't feel quite as hungry as you'd expect, but they do have a bit more sort of, feelings of thirst initially. We can help that with, ways to sort of make you feel less thirsty, less dry. Sponges to make your lips feel less dry, different oils, olive oil, or coconut oil can help. Some facial mists can help make you not feel like you're sort of as thirsty. And, again, similar to hunger, that also only lasts a day or so, a couple days. After the first few days, generally you're in a more sleepy state, as you're not drinking anything and not eating anything. It starts to affect your body and make you more sleepy, and sort of less cognitively aware. That's another reason it's important to have a good team behind you, because as you're going through this process, you may get a little more sort of confused, a little more sleepy, somnolent. And we want a good team of people who know you well so that they really know your wishes, know your intentions for going through this process, and support you enough to, sort of be there and provide, good support, advocacy if you needing the medication, really helping you through this. So you do have to still have decision-making capacity, to sort of be supported by a system in doing this, um, and be 18 years of age or older to get support. So, why would somebody choose this over, aid in dying? Ultimately, if they don't qualify for aid in dying, that's usually the biggest reason. This is another option if you're really suffering to end your suffering. Um, you do get that same autonomy of being able to control things. Um, it's a desire to end suffering, again, hastening your death. For some people, the religious beliefs surrounding actively taking something that ends your life is not allowable, but sort of not withholding things is permissive. So some people, for religious reasons, will opt to do this. Um, and yeah, ultimately, if you're unable to get aid and dying support for some reason, this is or unable to complete the process, it's another option. It's one of, many other options that we have. Another thing about VSET is the support around it can often get sort of a bit pricey as well, because you need towards the end more nursing support. Sometimes the physician support can get expensive, especially if it starts to take a while. And so, it can be kind of costly. And I guess it's a good time to mention that this service, in addition to medical aid and dying, are currently not covered by insurances. And, I think that that's something where, I would like to see that change in the future. But, the reality is right now it's not. And so, for medical aid in dying, it's often several $1,000s out of pocket. And, it can be challenging for some people. I find that at least for myself and a lot of the other people who do this work, we do work with people who are low income, and, we see people on a sliding scale, and, really make sure that people have access to this no matter their income. But still, I like people to be aware that of the cost. It could be $3,000 to $4,000. And some providers out there I know of charge even more than that. In addition to that, the medication is about $600 or $700. Also not covered by insurances, unless you have Medi-Cal, but otherwise not covered. I think it's important to be aware of these though, so you know sort of everything about what to expect going into them. You know what I mean? This is all about knowing your decision, knowing your options to make the best decision. Um, so that's, aid in dying. And, I say VSET is probably around that cost, but again, with nursing support, it can sometimes be even more expensive than that. So be aware of these costs as you're making a plan, just because they exist. And again, I think you should be aware of everything. I know Christy's going to talk about another option. Oh, I also it was one quick resource, the VSET handbook. I really like. I think that if you're considering it, Kate Christie did a great job of sort of going through the ins and outs, expectations, and how you might have to coordinate and orchestrate the whole process. So good to know about that. Yeah, it's gonna take a lot of planning. It's a marathon, requires significant preparation, and it's something that, you really, if you're considering it or if it's your only option, um, will take some planning, but is also another option and another good way to find a peaceful death.
So Switzerland, the only country in the world that allows non-citizens to have access to aid in dying. The two Swiss companies used the most by Americans, slide, are Dignitas and Pegasus. The person requesting the assistance to die must possess decision-making capacity. They must have control or ownership of the action over their death. It is the person themselves who must turn the knob or lift the glass to their mouth. This is what makes it a voluntary assisted death rather than the doctor-administered euthanasia. The reason I said turn the knob is because they do allow an IV option that is self-administered. The person requesting assistance must also provide a range of documents, which include proof of residence, your long-form birth certificate, certified and reissued within 6 months of voluntary assisted death, and if applicable, marriage, divorce, death certificate of spouse, and all of these are also have to be reissued within 6 months of taking voluntary assisted death. And they want your medical records. On the day of voluntary assisted death, you will have to demonstrate your cognitive ability and take the action to die. This is all captured on video for the Swiss authorities. They will contact the U.S. Embassy to let them know of your death, and they will also send a Swiss death certificate to an address of your choosing. There is no reason for death mentioned on the death certificate. Voluntary assisted death costs about $11,000 plus travel costs. This includes cremation and sending your body to the address of your choosing. Final exit network. Another option for those who don't qualify for medical aid in dying is Final Exit Network. It's a nationwide organization that provides free exit guides. These are two volunteers who educate people on a comfortable and reliable method to die. They can also provide a compassionate presence during the dying process. You don't have to be terminal, but do need to qualify for their program. The first step is to provide a written request as to why you want to hasten your death and provide pertinent medical records. People need to be competent adults facing an intractable medical situation, be in an early stage of dementia, or have a constellation of conditions. Once approved, which can take 4 to 6 weeks, the exit guides will provide home visits to explain the process, what equipment is needed, and where you can obtain the equipment. They also help you have conversations with loved ones. It's important that your loved ones be supportive and know what to expect. You do want to be discreet in disclosing that you are planning on hastening your death, as some mandated providers, physicians, and social workers are required to report a planned hastened death. Friends and family who do not agree may end up calling the police and requesting a wellness check on you. The individual must be able to independently procure the equipment, nitrogen tank, regulator, and hood assembly materials, all of which cost between $300 to $500. Assemble the equipment and administer the nitrogen. Explaining this process to someone is not illegal. It's protected under the First Amendment. But physically assisting someone is illegal. So it's very important that the person hastening their death does so completely independently. This method is quick, reliable, and peaceful. Once you have pulled the hood down over your head with the nitrogen flowing, unconsciousness will occur in about 30 seconds to a minute, and death will occur between 8 to 10 minutes. During this time, there may be some involuntary movements, so you want to be either in a recliner or in the middle of your bed. Vocalizations may occur as well. If someone is with you or you have set someone up to discover your body, they should wait about 2 hours before notifying the authorities because you don't want emergency personnel to try to resuscitate you. Dr. Moore and I have given you a lot of information. How do you get more information on these topics? You can go to the Hemlock Society of San Diego's website and search under past events to find the topic that interests you, as all meetings are recorded and displayed on the website. We have had meetings on all these topics. Dr. Moore is a past board member, and I am a current board member. The Hemlock Society of San Diego is primarily an educational organization providing free public Zoom programs and a Right to Die film series to inform people about their end-of-life options. Thank you for allowing us to come talk to you.
Wow, thank you very much, Dr. Moore and Christie. What a beautiful presentation. We all appreciate it. Everybody has remained on line during this riveting conversation. So thank you, thank you. And before I stop the recording, I wanted to just give an announcement to the group and any viewers that are going to be watching this video later, that we currently are still in our flu season. It hasn't quite peaked yet. I'm seeing a lot of cases of influenza A, even if people have received the vaccine. And it was just announced last night, 3 teenagers have passed away last month from influenza A. 2 were perfectly healthy teens. And we have had double the number of deaths, adult deaths from influenza A, in the last month compared to previous seasons. So please be careful. Let me know as soon as you guys are sick so we can get you diagnosed and treated right away. With that, I am going to stop the recording and we can open up the conversation for questions and answers.